Gio, what has been sort of your journey like, and where you're at now, having walked in various worlds, and where do you kind of see yourself moving forward, or media, or what you're doing?
Yeah, I think like initially, the conspiracy path, probably around the time I was watching Thematic, I don't know if we consider that conspiracy anymore or not. It was probably in that genre at one point.
Yeah, I call it a mind fuck with a little bit of everything.
And so like I remember like exactly what you're talking about, looking into it, wanting to share with people, but then people not ready for it and judging me for it. Then I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't talk about this. It's like too out there. Which put me into this, like, so when you isolate yourself, and this is, I just saw it interesting to talk about that today, what's happening now, when you sort of make like so much uncertainty and isolation, people start losing their minds a little bit. It's like they use that when they try to sort of make someone go crazy. If they put someone in like the hole or something, like isolation plus like uncertainty and like all this like decisions and flip-flopping of information. So when you go down some of these conspiracy paths, you're in spirituality, because there is no real answers in there. It's just a lot more questions, and you feel sort of isolated. It can be very challenging, but that's what sort of pushed me to the point of questioning all my reality, feeling like I was losing touch, and then really diving deep into spirituality. So it was a catalyst for me, and it's not for all people, but for a lot of people, I've seen it go that way. And then it sort of got to a point where, you know, especially even with like psychedelics, that's what sort of came next for me, going like doing ayahuasca in Brazil in 2013, which was not early by any standard, but for my community where I live, like no one had heard about ayahuasca in 2013. And coming back and wanting to share with everyone like what I found and how amazing it was. Them looking at me like I had 3 heads, like, hey, don't say that too loud. People are gonna think you're crazy. It's like, whoa. And then like I was doing a lot of business at the time in like the real world, we'll call it, or like the business world, where like this was like, you know, like very conservative people, older people. And I was about to launch this documentary, and I was like a lot of fear around that. And I was just like, you know what? Like if people don't want to talk to me because of this, then probably people I don't want to deal with either. I don't want to talk to, because they're not open-minded. They know who I am as a person, but because I'm interested in something, they're gonna like cut me off completely or think or judge me. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to be who I am. I'm going to speak openly about the things that I do and the things that I'm into, and we'll see who that attracts into my life and who it sort of pushes away. And I think a lot of times, a lot of us are out of harmony because we're pretending to be someone we think everyone else wants us to be. And then we're attracting those people who don't really like us for who we are. And we keep those people close in our lives. But really, we're evolving as humans. And as you change, you know, your people around you are going to change, but they're only going to change if you're setting off that signal of like who your true self is or who you really are. So once I just started talking openly about all these things, yes, some people right away ended up sort of distancing, but I surrounded myself with all these new amazing people that were more open-minded, and not necessarily like-minded, open-minded, so we can have a conversation. They can challenge what I believe in, and have their own beliefs, and we can have these conversations openly without judging each other or saying who's right or wrong, and helps me to sort of get more perspective. And that sort of changed me out of this bubble where everyone thought the same way. Everyone was just like, this is how it is. This is what we're doing. We're gonna, you know, drink beer on Sunday, watch NFL football, and then, you know, on the weekends we're gonna go party at clubs, and we're gonna try to make as much money as possible. And, you know, like this old lifestyle, was what I thought was reality, you know, ended up, you know, it's still reality for some, and it's still part of my reality because that's who I was. But it allowed me to sort of, once I started being open with what I was into, just opened up a whole new paradigm for me in life. And it was hard, but that's what it sort of led to. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's sort of how I interpreted what you were asking as far as what the process has been like for me. And it continues to be that. Like I'm an open book, and the more I share and the more I hear other people, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try that. And it's led me to some really interesting experiences and amazing conversations.
For sure, man. I mean, it allows, and I was literally experiencing that like an hour ago, putting up some new Ben Stewart, some BSP clips, and it was finishing off our UAP series, and it was a little more fringy stuff, and all my friends and family kind of know me as that guy who's into this stuff, but I was still having some like real anxiety nerve. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be a little weird, and I like, this is more public facing and people are gonna know, but like, you know, fuck it, man, like whatever. And I was just like, you know what? If I gotta remember, I think Ben Brown was talking about this in our last pod, but I was like, you know, the more I fucking own it and I'm vulnerable, the more it allows others to be vulnerable. And I just gotta, you know, push through that weirdness and anxiety. And if, some girl I go on a date with looks it up and I'm like, oh yeah, you know, let's talk about this. Like, who cares? Whatever. Let's
just
go.
Keep being a good person, like through it all. Like, just be a good person.
Yeah.
You know, because when they start seeing you for who you are, like then like they'll look at all these things like, wow, this is a really level-headed, good person. And I think like in my community, because I was doing well in business, they looked at me differently than if I was just not doing that. So they would sort of still be attentive to what I had to say. But ultimately, you know, how my wife accepted the ayahuasca was she saw a positive change in me. I was more loving.
Yeah.
I was more compassionate. I didn't get angry as much. And I think through all these things, when you tell people, like, you smile and say, hey, listen, like, I love you, you know, like, it's okay. Like, I care about you. You know, we're still friends. You know, it's like it drops those boundaries rather than the old me was like, I got to prove that I'm right. I got to prove that all these things I'm talking about is right and you're wrong. Or you don't know what you're talking about because you don't understand what I know. Right. And it's like when I shift from that, saying, hey, listen, it's okay. Like, I still love you either way. Like, this is just what I'm doing right now, or this is what I'm into, or this is what I've been experiencing. And I can tell both you guys are great guys, you know, and the more you just bring that, hey, I'm a good person and I'm going to be a good person, you know, it's like, okay, like, they'll accept it more. That's been my experience anyway.
You're welcome to the party.
Yeah, well, for sure. And what I love about this is like what is bringing up for me is that was a very similar inroad for me to awakening. I could say that it might have started when I was 13, 14. Like, admittedly, I started doing psychedelics at a young age, and also got into Taoism. And for so many people, I remember the reason why I did it mainly was because, of course, I wanted to feel altered. I wanted to know what that felt like, but I didn't feel like doing the opioids. I didn't feel like doing, like, you know, pain reduction, you know, or even like the cocaine. There was something I was really into. I was like, I want mushrooms. Like, it's from the earth. Like, it's very old. Let's give that a go. And that could have been where I started, but conspiracy actually was when I felt my calling. I felt it. I never felt it in sports. I felt it in music. I take that back. I felt it in music as soon as I found music and poetry. But then that kind of also feeds into when I found conspiracy, I didn't just find, like, you know, something ranting about pedophilia and like very dark hate spewing. It was Zeitgeist by Peter Joseph, which was well done. It had a good soundtrack. It was a logical train of thought. You know, there's a lot we could argue and debate about with it, but it was a logical train of thought. It was a global, you know, it wasn't about just 9/11 or just RFID trips. It had this chips. It had this whole, like, that, you know, look at your reality. It's different than you think. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to see my name anywhere in this film. Plus, you know, it was anonymous and it was free and it was well done. So it broke a bunch of rules, and it that allowed it to supersede people's, like, red flags. And I saw it on a plant medicine. And so like, conspiracy never once scared me. Never once. It still to this day has never once scared me. It has always showed me exactly the nature of the landscape that I'm meant to now start embarking upon. And as much as there's certain ideas that I had back in the days of Esoteric Agenda and Kymatica that now I'm like, all right, I'm glad I kept reading. I'm glad I balanced it upon other ideologies. But I owe a lot to conspiracy. And if you think of what is conspiracy, it's an extreme, according to, you have to reference it to what is conventional, thinking that even Jamie Wheal and some people that I think are some of the smartest cats around with self-improvement, self-discovery, that newsletter that Jamie Wheal sent out, he was basically pigeonholing all of conspiracy theory like this. And I was like, I just emailed him today, or maybe I didn't hit send because I was wondering if I should or not. But I remember thinking the whole point of it was like, dude, you're right on, but there's room for improvement right here. When you take a whole group of people that you've probably only met like 0.001% of, and you put a label on all of them, you got it wrong. You got part of it wrong. And but I love that part of it, you know, and I love that there are these other platforms of which can bring us into what's the important thing. This is why I would almost say is like I've been rehabbing off of conspiracy as being the singular frame of reference by which I communicate my reality. Because when you do that, you're always coming from there's something horribly wrong, and I can point at people that are the worst offenders of it. And I realized, I was like, that's not efficient for what I know I'm meant to be doing here. I'm meant to be moving people. And so part of that is awakening them. But another part of that is conspiracy today is not conspiracy circa 2007, 2008. It's different. So people are more emotionally charged now. Make sure y'all head over to benjosephstewart.com, become a member. You'll have access to the growing library of deeper dives where I talk about all the stuff that I really can't talk about on YouTube. Make sure you get involved in the Discord chat. That's where a lot of the conversation is happening, talking about new theories, being able to interweave into the greater conversation that is how we awaken infinity. That's our highest potential. And I just want to remind you, you are the most powerful technology ever known to creation. Wield it like an artist with a conscience.